Ever feel like you need a secret decoder ring for all the latest market insights, especially with a company making, well, huge waves globally? Today, we're doing just that. We're taking a deep dive into Novo Nordisk, you know them, trading under the symbol NVO. Our mission for you, our curious listener, is to really unpack the latest research we've got from Compass Scope. And we'll also break down the company's recent Q1 2025 earnings call. We want to give you the essential facts, maybe some surprising nuggets, and the critical insights, just to make you feel well-informed on this major player.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here isn't just, understanding a big pharma company. It's about grasping the complex market dynamics they're navigating, especially in this rapidly changing chronic disease landscape.
Yeah.
This deep dive, it's really designed to show what genuinely drives their business and, frankly, the broader implications for the whole healthcare sector.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Who exactly is Novo Nordisk? I mean, beyond the headlines.
Right. So fundamentally, they're a global healthcare company based in Denmark, specializing in pharmaceuticals. And their main focus is chronic diseases. But that covers a lot of ground.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice? What are their core business lines?
Well, their foundation is really broad, even though one area gets most of the attention lately. First off, they have a massive diabetes care portfolio. And this isn't just one thing. It's a whole insulin portfolio. You've got the modern ones people know, like Novolog, Novomix, Levemir. Then there are the next generation ones like Tresiba and Fiasp. And they're even launching a weekly insulin, in 2025. Plus, they still have human insulin.
Wow, okay, so insulin is still a big piece.
A very big piece. But alongside that, they're a powerhouse in GLP-1 therapies for diabetes. Think daily options like Victoza and, crucially, Rybelsus, that's the oral semaglutide.
Yeah.
And, of course, the weekly injectable Ozempic. Huge product.
Right, Ozempic. And that leads us straight into where all the buzz seems to be lately, obesity care.
Exactly. It's the same GLP-1 science, largely. For obesity, the big one is the weekly injectable Wegovy. It's practically a household name now. They've also got an oral semaglutide, a higher dose, 25 milligram under FDA review right now. And their pipeline here is pretty stacked. They're working on next-gen combination treatments like hygrosema, amycretin, cagrilintide, trying to hit obesity from multiple angles.
So it's not just GLP-1s, even within obesity.
Not entirely, no. They're looking at combinations. But it doesn't stop there. They also have a significant rare disease portfolio. This includes treatments for rare blood disorders like Novo7 for hemophilia and others, and also rare endocrine disorders with growth hormones like norepinephrine and a newer one, Sogroya.
Okay, that's more diverse than I realized.
It is, and they're pushing into emerging therapeutic areas too. Their pipeline is exploring cardiometabolic diseases, things like MSH, that's the new term for fatty liver disease, heart failure, sleep apnea, even Alzheimer's disease, often using GLP-1 combinations again.
So the GLP-1 platform has reach.
Incredible reach. And underpinning all of this, they're massive biologics manufacturing operations. They make their own active pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs, the core drug stuff, and they handle fill finish, getting it into pens or vials. That recent Catalent manufacturing acquisition, that was all about boosting this capability big time.
Got it. So yeah, as you can hear, while GLP-1s are definitely a huge part of the story, Novo Nordisk has this broader, really deeply entrenched presence across a lot of chronic diseases. It's complex. But how does this translate competitively when they face off against rivals? How strong are they, really?
Yes, the competitive landscape. That's where it gets really interesting. They have some clear advantages. First, undeniable market leadership in GLP-1 therapies. They dominate both diabetes and obesity segments globally, holding something like 34% of the global diabetes market overall. Their strong intangible assets are key, too. Think robust R&D, innovation, and crucially, the ability to extend patent life. Semaglutide, for example, is protected out to 2032.
2032, wow, that's a long runway.
It is. Then there's their pipeline strength. It's broad, targeting adjacent areas, like we mentioned. The obesity market alone could top $200 billion by 2031, so the potential is enormous. Plus, their manufacturing scale and expertise gives them economies of scale that are hard to match. And, important point, geographic diversification. They're global, not overly reliant on just one market, although the U.S. is big for them, about 57% of revenue.
Okay, sounds strong.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the flip side, the challenges?
Oh, absolutely. There are significant challenges. Intense competition, number one. Eli Lilly. Their drug Tirzepatide, marketed as Mounjaro for diabetes, Zepbound for obesity, is a very strong competitor. Then there's pricing pressure, big time. You've got the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, looming large with potential Medicare negotiations. And in places like China, there are volume-based procurement policies pushing prices down.
And the supply issues. You mentioned the Catalan deal, but they did struggle, right?
Definitely. Supply chain constraints, particularly scaling Wegovy manufacturing fast enough, have been a real headache for them. There's also the risk of post-patent competition, especially as easier to make oral GLP-1s potentially emerge down the line. And, litigation risk. Any big pharma company faces this, potential side effects, off-label marketing claims. It seems to be around 2% of net income for them based on Compass Scope.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you trying to understand the landscape? How do they specifically stack up against their closest peers, especially Lilly?
Right, let's do a quick head-to-head for Novo Nordisk NVO. Strengths are that GLP-1 leadership, Wegovy's triple-digit growth historically, the strong pipeline, global reach. Weaknesses, those pricing risks, especially from the IRA, and the ongoing supply scalability for obesity meds.
Okay, and Lilly?
Eli Lilly, LOY. Their big strength is Tirzepatide. It's a dual GIP-GLP-1 agonist, shows superior efficacy in trials, especially weight loss. They have huge momentum in the U.S. market right now. Weaknesses, more limited international penetration compared to Novo, and that heavy reliance on the U.S. market.
What about others, like Sanofi?
Sanofi, SNY, is still a major player, especially in the global insulin market, and they have biosimilars. But their weakness is clearly lagging in GLP-1 innovation. They missed that wave, relatively speaking. And then you have emerging competitors, Boehringer, Ingelheim, Amgen, Viking Therapeutics. They have interesting stuff in their pipelines, early stage mostly, but they lack the commercialized blockbusters to really challenge Novo or Lilly right now.
So the takeaway?
I'd say Novo Nordisk holds more defensible competitive advantages overall, primarily due to that established GLP-1 innovation lead, their scale in obesity care, and their advanced biologics manufacturing. Lilly is a very robust competitor, no question, especially on efficacy and U.S. momentum. But Novo just has that broader geographic reach and a more diversified base, arguably.
That makes sense. A really strong position, despite the challenges. So with that backdrop, how does Novo Nordisk plan to keep growing? What's the strategy?
Their growth strategy is pretty clear and multi-pronged. First, obviously, expansion of GLP-1 therapy leadership, maintain dominance in that market, which, as we said, is expected to explode maybe $200 billion by 2031. They'll do this with Wegovy, Rybelsus, Ozempic, and bringing new pipeline drugs like CagriSema online.
I double down on GLP-1s.
Absolutely. Second, really push for obesity market leadership. This means getting Wegovy adopted more widely globally. It's launched in over 25 international markets now. They want to capitalize on being first with an approved oral GLP-1 for obesity, assuming the 25 milligram dose gets FDA approval, and it involves scaling manufacturing and improving access like that NovoCare direct-to-patient channel.
So make it easier to get, basically.
Oh, exactly. Third, it's pipeline development beyond obesity and diabetes. Investing in those cardiometabolic areas, we talked about MSH, heart failure, Alzheimer's, sleep apnea. Trials for combinations like CagriSema are key here. Fourth, geographic expansion into emerging markets like China, even with pricing pressures there. And fifth, underpinning it all, manufacturing scalability. That Catalan deal is just one part of major investments here. Oh, and finally, providing sustainable shareholder returns through dividends, buybacks when possible, and maybe some smaller targeted acquisitions.
How does that stack up against what competitors are doing?
Well, Lilly, as we said, is laser-focused on expanding Tirzepatide and its successors, really doubling down on diabetes and obesity with their pipeline. Sanofi is trying to catch up, focusing more on biosimilars and some different mechanisms. Pfizer, Amgen, BI, they're trying to carve out niches, often with different approaches or earlier stage assets.
And the potential for Novo's strategy. Is it achievable? What are the big risks?
The revenue and profit potential for Novo looks significant. That $200 billion obesity market is still vastly underpenetrated. The shift from insulin reliance to GLP-1s, now making up nearly 3/4 of sales, is huge, and expanding into related areas like MAH adds more runway. Achievability seems pretty high, backed by their manufacturing clout, supply chain focus now, that first mover advantage in orals, and the global rollout. But the risks are real. Ongoing supply challenges, the fierce competition from Lilly, and those looming pricing pressures. It's a solid strategy, but execution is everything.
Right, execution. No company operates risk-free. What are the key execution risks specifically for Novo Nordisk that you'd flag?
Good question. I'd highlight a few key ones. Number one is still supply chain and manufacturing constraints. The demand for Wegovy especially just keeps surprising them. The Catalent acquisition helps, but meeting global demand consistently is a huge operational challenge. Any slip-ups open the door for competitors.
Okay, manufacturing is critical. What else?
Second, regulatory and pricing pressure. We keep coming back to this, but the U.S. IRA is a big deal for them, given their U.S. exposure. Price negotiations for Ozempic Rybelsus starting potentially in 2027, that could really impact margins. Plus, China's VBP and general global scrutiny on drug prices.
Makes sense. Competition.
Third, competitive threats. Eli Lilly's Tirzepatide is gaining share fast, and new oral GLP-1s are coming, not just from Lilly, but potentially others too. They need to keep innovating and execute commercially to stay ahead. Fourth, pipeline risk. Yes, their pipeline is strong, but they are very reliant on GLP-1s right now. If there's market saturation, unexpected safety issues across the class, or if their diversification efforts into areas like cardiovascular or Alzheimer's don't pan out, that's a risk.
Anything else? Litigation.
Yeah. Fifth, litigation and ESG risks. Product litigation, side effect claims are always possible, and growing scrutiny on drug pricing and accessibility falls under that ESG umbrella. Compascope noted legal costs around 2% of net income, so it's a factor. And maybe sixth, just revenue and geographic concentration. While they are global, heavy reliance on GLP-1 therapies and the U.S. market specifically does concentrate some risk.
Okay, quite a list. How do these risks compare across the competitors? Is Novo in a better or worse spot?
It's relative, of course. Eli Lilly faces similar intense supply chain risk for Mounjaro Zepbound, and they are even more reliant on the U.S. market, so perhaps even more exposed to U.S. pricing changes initially. Sanofi's big risk is arguably innovation lag. They're behind in the hottest market segment, Pfizer and the emerging players. They face higher clinical development risk. Their drugs just aren't proven yet at scale.
So if you had to rank them on execution risk,
I'd probably put Novo Nordisk at a comparatively lower execution risk overall. Why? Because of their established leadership, that broader pipeline beyond just one drug, their proven manufacturing scale now being ramped up, and their global footprint. Eli Lilly would be moderate risk, huge potential, but high reliance on Tirzepatide, and the U.S. Sanofi and the emerging players face higher risks due to either lagging innovation or the inherent uncertainties of early-stage pipelines.
okay, that risk assessment is really helpful. Now let's really zoom in on that GLP-1 market itself. It's moving so fast. What's the landscape look like right now in 2025? And this idea that Novo might be losing, what's the reality?
Right, 2025, it's a battleground. Let's break it down by segment, using some rough numbers from recent reports and the earnings call context. Type 2 diabetes injectable. Ozempic from Novo is still the global leader, maybe around $20 billion in sales, holding something like 56% global value share, maybe 49% of U.S. prescriptions. But Lilly's Mounjaro is coming on strong, maybe $16 billion sales, 42% global share, and closing fast in the U.S. at around 47% RX share. Lilly is closing the gap there.
Okay, neck and neck in U.S. diabetes injectables. What about obesity?
Obesity injectable, this is where the narrative gets interesting. Wegovy from Novo, maybe $11 billion sales, still holds the majority worldwide value share, around 55%, maybe 45% of U.S. prescriptions. But Lilly Zepbound, maybe $9 billion sales, 45% worldwide share. It actually overtook Wegovy in U.S. total prescriptions back in mid-March. That was a big moment. Zepbound now has about 53% U.S. RX.
Whoa, okay, so Zepbound is leading in U.S. obesity prescriptions now. What about orals?
Oral GLP-1. Right now, that's basically all Novo Nordisk. Rybelsus, maybe $4 billion sales, has over 95% value share because it's the only one approved. However, Lilly's oral candidate, or orforglipron, just had successful phase 3 results. They're targeting a 2026 launch. That could completely shake up the oral segment.
Okay, so that brings us back to the big question.
Yeah.
Is Novo Nordisk losing this race, given Zepbound's U.S. lead?
Yeah, it's the question everyone asks. Look, globally, Novo Nordisk still holds about 67% of the total GLP-1 value share. So no, they are absolutely not losing on a global scale. They're still the leader thanks to Ozempic's dominance in diabetes and having the only oral option for now. But there is undeniable U.S. erosion, specifically in the obesity market. Zepbound taking the RX lead is significant, and now we're seeing this pricing dynamic like CVS making Wegovy the exclusive formulary option, likely after getting a better price from Novo. It's turning into a bit of a pricing war, at least with certain payers.
The pricing war. Okay,
Yeah.
What about the pipelines? Who has the edge there?
That's the other part of the narrative favoring Lilly right now, this perception of a pipeline quality gap. Lilly's next wave drugs, like retatrutide, a triple agonist, and orforglipron, the oral, seem to promise either significantly greater weight loss or much better oral convenience based on early data. Novo's CagriSema, while effective, showed more incremental gains over existing therapies in its recent trial. So the narrative is that Lilly might have the next big leap. So to sum up, Novo isn't losing globally, not by a long shot, but the momentum, particularly in the high-value U.S. obesity market, has definitely pivoted towards Lilly for now.
This is fascinating. Okay, now let's compare the main drugs directly. Semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy, Rybelsus versus Tirzepatide, Mounjaro, Zepbound. Effectiveness and safety.
Head-to-head trial data generally shows Tirzepatide is superior for both type 2 diabetes and obesity. For diabetes, it lowers HbA1c more and leads to more weight loss. For obesity, the weight reduction is significantly greater, think around 22.5% body weight loss for Tirzepatide versus maybe 14.9% for semaglutide in key trials. So on pure efficacy, especially for weight loss, Tirzepatide generally wins.
And safety. Any big differences?
The safety profile is broadly comparable. Both commonly cause GI side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, especially when starting or increasing the dose. These tend to be mild to moderate and often decrease over time. Semaglutide does carry a clearer warning about diabetic retinopathy in its label. Tirzepatide might have a slightly higher GI burden at the top doses, but that's often offset by the higher efficacy in patients' minds. Overall, tolerability is considered similar for most people.
You mentioned Rybelsus. The oral semaglutide lags a bit. Why is that?
Okay.
And can Lilly's oral or ferglipirin fix those issues?
Yeah, Rybelsus hasn't quite matched the injectable success. Several reasons. There's that tricky absorption ritual. Must be taken on an empty stomach with just a sip of water, then wait 30 minutes before eating, drinking, or taking other meds. That's tough for adherence. It also has a lower potency ceiling. The highest approved dose, 14 milligrams daily, gives about half the exposure of the standard Ozempic injectable dose. It doesn't have an obesity label yet. And frankly, Novo likely prioritized manufacturing capacity for the higher margin Wegovy and Ozempic during shortages. Now, could Lilly's or Volpron fix these? Early signs point to yes. Crucially, it's a small molecule, non-peptide, so no fasting requirement seems needed. That's huge for convenience. Phase 2 data showed materially greater weight loss than Rybelsus, maybe 9–11% versus 3–4 kilograms for Rybelsus over similar periods. And being a small molecule likely means cheaper manufacturing costs compared to peptide injectables or even oral peptides like Rybelsus. So yes, orforglipron looks poised to be potentially both more convenient and more potent.
Wow. Okay. So what's the big picture then for this whole GLP-1 market? Where's it headed?
The big picture is explosive growth. The total addressable market, or TAM, is expanding incredibly fast. It was maybe $49 billion in 2024, projected over $62 billion in 2025, and could easily exceed $150 billion by 2035, maybe even more. Right now, it's largely a two-horse race, NVO versus LLY, but it's rapidly becoming a poly-horse race. You've got credible newcomers like Amgen with Maritide, monthly injectable, Viking Therapeutics with promising candidates, Roche Zealand, AstraZeneca, Structure Therapeutics, all bringing different approaches, orals, dual triple agonists, different mechanisms. Lilly definitely owns the U.S. obesity narrative right now and seems best positioned for that next generational leap in efficacy convenience. The key takeaway is the entry of potent small molecule orals and potentially even more effective multi-agonists means this GLP-1 field is going to shift from today's duopoly to a much more crowded, complex, and likely very payer-driven marketplace by 2027 or so. Price and access will become even more critical.
Incredible. Okay, let's bring it right up to the present. Novo Nordisk just had their Q1 2025 earnings call. What were the key updates? What trends are shaping their business right now?
Right. The Q1 call gave us a fresh snapshot. Overall performance was solid. 18% sales growth, 20% operating profit growth, both at constant exchange rates. And they highlighted serving nearly 46 million patients globally, which is up almost 4 million from the year before. Huge reach.
Solid numbers. But didn't they adjust their guidance?
They did. They actually reduced their full-year outlook, and the main reason cited was lower-than-planned branded GLP-1 penetration, especially in the U.S. The culprit, the rapid expansion of compounded GLP-1s. They estimate maybe 1 million or even more patients in the U.S. are using compounded versions, often sourced from compounding pharmacies.
Wow, 1 million patients on compounded versions. How are they responding to that?
It's a major focus for them. They highlighted that the FDA removed semaglutide from the official drug shortage list back in February. Legally, that makes compounding semaglutide generally unlawful, with very narrow exceptions. So Novo is actively working to prevent what they see as unlawful compounding. Part of their strategy includes new initiatives to provide legitimate, affordable access, like that NovoCare pharmacy initiative launched in March offering a self-pay, direct-to-patient delivery of Wegovy for $499 a month, trying to capture some of that cash pay market that might otherwise go to compounders. They also expanded collaborations with telehealth organizations in April to streamline access. And then there was that big news. CVS chose Wegovy as the only GLP-1 covered for obesity on its main national formulary starting July 1st. Novo emphasized they didn't pursue exclusivity, suggesting CVS made the choice based on Wegovy's data, particularly its established cardiovascular benefits from the SELECT trial. That's a big win for them in the payer space.
That CVS deal sounds significant. Okay, what about sales breakdown in Q1?
Sales were strong both in the U.S., up 17%, and internationally, up 19%. GLP-1 diabetes sales increased 11%, mainly driven by Ozempic uptake. They also got approval based on the FLOW trial data to add chronic kidney disease risk reduction to Ozempic's label, which helps. Ozempic still holds over 50% U.S. market share in its class by prescription count. Obesity care sales were up a massive 65% globally. That's 39% growth in the U.S. and a stunning 137% internationally, all driven by Wegovy, though partly offset as older drug Saxenda declines. Rare disease sales were up a modest 3%.
All right, strong growth, especially obesity.
Yeah.
Any key R&D updates from the quarter?
Yes, several important ones. CagriSema, their next-gen obesity combo therapy, completed a pivotal trial showing 15.7% weight loss versus placebo. They expect to file for approval in Q1 2026. The oral Semaglutide 25 mg for obesity application was submitted to the U.S. FDA in February. If approved, it could be the first oral GLP-1 specifically for obesity in the U.S. That's based on trials showing average 16.6% weight loss. They also noted manufacturing for this is being done in the U.S., and really excitingly, their application for Wegovy 2.4 mg to treat MASH, fatty liver disease, was accepted by the FDA and got priority review. The results from the Essence Phase 3 trial were described as potentially the best Phase 3 results within MSH to date, showing significant improvement in liver fibrosis and resolution of the underlying inflammation. That could be a major label expansion. They also mentioned 2 new early-stage assets they in-licensed for obesity and cardiometabolic diseases.
And managed could be huge. Okay, any quick financial details that stood out?
Yeah, a couple things. Gross margin dipped slightly to 83.5%, partly due to costs related to the Catalent integration and general capacity expansions. Makes sense. R&D costs jumped 19%, mainly funding those big late-stage obesity trials. Capital expenditure, CapEx, was way up DKK 13.4 billion compared to 8.4 billion the year before. That clearly shows the massive investment going into building out API and fill finish capacity. And because of that huge CapEx, they confirmed no share buyback program in 2025. They're prioritizing building factories over buying back stock right now.
Got it. Investing heavily in manufacturing. Any of the key trends they mentioned?
They did share an interesting metric. The average time patients stay on obesity medications is now around 7.4 months, and that duration continues to increase as the brand gets more established. Getting patients to stay on treatment longer is key for the market. They also noted that while compounded GLP-1s are often cheaper than that $499 cash price for Wegovy, many patients using compounded products actually do have insurance coverage for the branded options, but maybe aren't using it due to cost sharing or access hurdles. It highlights the complexity of patient access.
Fascinating dynamics. Okay, so pulling this all together, looking ahead, what should you, our informed listener, really keep an eye on when it comes to Novo Nordisk and this whole market?
All right, based on the CompaScope report and that Q1 call, here are the key things to watch. 1. GLP-1 competitive dynamics. Keep a close eye on Lilly's Tirzepatide, Mounjaro Zepbound. How fast does it continue to gain share, especially outside the U.S.? Watch emerging competitors like Amgen, Viking. When do their drugs hit Phase 3? What's the data look like? And critically, how does increased competition impact pricing power? That U.S. obesity market pricing war is something to monitor closely.
Okay, competition and pricing. What's next?
2. Obesity market penetration and growth. Monitor those patient adherence rates. Can they push that 7.4 months average higher? Watch for payer coverage expansion. Are more employers, more plans covering these drugs? And how are they navigating affordability challenges in international markets?
Right, regulatory.
3. Regulatory and pricing reform risks. The big one is the U.S. IRA. When do Ozempic and Rybelsus actually enter price negotiations? Likely 2027 at the earliest, but the anticipation matters. Also, keep watching China's VBP policies and any other global moves to control high drug prices.
Manufacturing, still key.
4. Manufacturing and supply chain scalability. Absolutely critical. Can Novo fully scale production for Wegovy, Ozempic, and importantly, the upcoming oral semaglutide 25 milligram? Meeting demand reliably is essential to defend market share. The Catalent integration progress is key here.
And the pipeline beyond GLP-1s?
5. Pipeline performance in cardiometabolic and adjacent indications. The success of drugs like cagrilema, amycretin, and their efforts in MSH, heart failure, Alzheimer's. This is crucial for long-term diversification and growth beyond the core GLP-1 battleground. Watch those clinical trial readouts.
Got it. Anything else?
6. Patient access and payer dynamics. How do formulary decisions like the CVS one play out across other payers? How effectively can Novo transition patients currently on compounded GLP-1s onto their branded products, potentially using things like NovoCare? Access is everything for these premium priced drugs, so maybe a quick watcher's checklist for 2025-26. Keep an eye on those formulary decisions each quarter. Who's covering what? Watch for Lilly's retatrutide phase 3 data, expected late 2025. See if the FDA accepts Novo's high-dose oral semaglutide application, expected late 2025. Look out for the first head-to-head cardiovascular outcome data comparing Ozempic and Mounjaro. And of course, track those manufacturing capacity ramps or the new lines coming online as planned.
That's a fantastic checklist. Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you? We just done a really deep dive into Novo Nordisk's complex business, that fierce GLP-1 competition, especially with Eli Lilly, and their pretty ambitious growth plans.
Yeah, and what's just so fascinating here is seeing how the future of this massive market, GLP-1s, chronic disease management, it hinges on so much more than just does the new drug work better. It's about manufacturing scale. It's about smart strategic pricing moves. It's about navigating that incredibly complex web of patient access and payer decisions. I mean, that whole ongoing battle with compounding pharmacies in the U.S., it's a perfect example of just how dynamic and frankly messy this market is. It really highlights that tension between driving innovation, ensuring patient access, and, maintaining market control and profitability.
That really brings it home and raises a final important question for you to think about. As all these new, potentially even more potent oral injectable GLP-1s keep hitting the market, from Novo, from Lilly, from others, is the main focus going to shift entirely to just the level of efficacy, how much weight you lose, how much blood sugar drops? Or will factors like convenience, like a daily pill versus an injection, and maybe even more importantly, price, become the truly dominant factors for patients and payers in what's clearly becoming a very crowded, very competitive market? Something to definitely keep an eye on. That's it for this deep dive. We really hope you feel much more informed and ready to keep exploring this incredibly dynamic industry.
This content is produced by Compasscope.com. For more than 1,100 public listed companies, find detailed research reports, visual mind maps, earnings call analysis, and audio discussions on Compasscope.com.